if you fall apart and resort to drugs and just give up on life because, you stubbed your toe, you're not going to be very successful in life. If you want to be a success, you're going to have to learn to deal with adversity and figure out ways to get past it and go beyond. In other words, use that low to go higher in your life. Welcome back to another episode of Iron Therapy. I'm Dave Palumbo, joined as always by our RxMuscle staff psychotherapist, Lesley Timbol. How are you doing on this beautiful March day?
It's not snowing in Vegas, so I'm pretty happy.
That's good. I thought that you permanently brought the snow from Canada to Vegas. That wouldn't be good,
No.
So how long can you actually stay in Vegas now before you have to go back?
The end of April is when I go back, unless I can get a visa. So we'll see. It may not be panning out, so I might have to go back, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, at least if you can get out of Canada just for the winters, that alone might be worth it right there.
Yeah.
How often can you come to the U.S. for stretches of time?
Well, if I don't have a visa, I've maxed out my 3-year, it's in 3-year increments. There's a certain formula to follow. It's not 6 months on, 6 months off.
Oh.
So So I'm at my max for this year, so I wouldn't be able to come back for the rest of the year. I'd have to wait till next year.
Like January 1st type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, at least you escaped the winter, so that's not too bad. But what are you actually looking to do to be able to facilitate you actually staying here? Because it looks like that's what your goal is, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's different kinds of visas. Eventually, I want to move to the U.S. permanently, so I want a green card. So in order to do that, that process is a lot longer. So if I got something called a TN visa, it would be a shorter term where I could still stay here. It buys me time. I can work in the States and then apply for the other visa at the same time.
I told you how to do it. You're just not listening. You should have just played your cards and married Jimmy the Bull, and you would have gotten citizenship. You would have gotten at least temporary, and you would have had to live together, you two, which would have created a reality show in and of itself, right there. You see, you could have had a job right there,
that's right,
a green card, all at the same time.
And another podcast for RxMuscle.
Yeah, right, another podcast. That's right, exactly.
Well, he has to move out of New York, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Well, I mean, if you sweeten the pot, he probably have an incentive to, So, but anyway, that's one. If he doesn't work out, we can always find you someone else. I'm sure there's a bunch of whack packers that would love to marry you or pretend to marry you at least.
There you go.
Let's get to the top. I had to create a little humor because the topic at hand is not so humorous.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, Calum Von Moger, who has gone through an innumerable crazy episodes over the last couple of years. We've talked about it on the show. We've given advice. You've given a lot of advice on how he can handle it. Looked like he kind of got past the drug addiction. He's been in the U.S. It's a miracle the guy could even walk after, jumping out of a second-story window. It looks like he was getting his life back together, and that's great. We all love Calum, and we've been sending prayers and healing energy to this guy for the last 2 years. Looked like he pulled it off, and just a couple days ago we find out that his brother passes, someone who's very close to, from suicide, and I have to imagine that that's greatly negatively influencing, his thought process. Now, when someone is a recovering, person who recovers from, drugs and all kinds of mental issues, there's his brother right there on the right, Calum on the left. I mean, what do you advise someone? I'm sure I would hope he's seeing a therapist at this point to help him get through this, but what are the risks right now to Calum's mental health?
Oh, they're extremely high. It's hard enough to stay sober when you have a tragedy like this, and to your point, Calum was very, very, very close with Edward, his brother. That's going to hit home. So it's very easy for us when we're feeling in a very vulnerable spot to go to our past behaviors that gave us some form of comfort, whether it's healthy or not. So yeah, Calum is in a very difficult position, not just because he lost his brother, but his ways of coping is very tempting for him, what he used to do in the past, but that would be the worst thing he can do. We can talk about what he can do, but yes, he's in a very vulnerable position. So apart from, if he wasn't seeing his therapist, go back to see his therapist, whether it be support groups, one-on-one work, getting additional support. Let's say, I'm not sure what the relationship is like with his family right now. But if it is a good relationship, being able to share that, because they all have that experience of that family member, and being able to share positive experiences, not just the negative of the end result, but being able to celebrate his life, not just focus on his death.
Too bad the brother couldn't have gotten out of Australia with Colin. Mm-hmm. Although maybe it was better that they were separate, because I don't think the brother was ready, or the brother, I don't know what the brother's status was. I don't know if he was trying to clean out too, or if he was still continuing his ways after Colin left. Obviously, what happened to Colin when he jumped out of that window, I mean, that was very traumatic. He had to come out. He didn't have a choice, basically, but to come off the drugs. And I mean, he almost died, right? I mean, so that the roles could have easily reversed, right? I mean, the
Sure.
brother could have been the guy who got clean, and Colin could have kept going. So the only way I can really relate it to myself, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is not just to give advice to Colin, because I'm sure Colin has people also giving advice. It's because other people who are watching this, it happens to all of us. I have my mom, and I've talked about this before. My mom passed away when I was 14 from pancreatic cancer. So she had a 2-year battle. It was brutal. Anyone who's gone through pancreatic cancer with a loved one knows that it's not a nice death. It ravages your body, and she was on chemotherapy and all that terrible stuff that goes along with it. Of course, I bottled it up and didn't deal with it until 25 years later. But I have a friend, Brian Barczyk. If any of you guys watch any of the pet channels online, Brian is a big name. He's almost like the Steve Irwin of the modern era of reptiles, and he just loves snakes and reptiles, and he's got a huge following, a couple million subscribers on his Brian Barczyk YouTube channel, and each video he puts up gets over 100,000 likes, and he's built a huge reptarium in one part of his building that he has, and across the street he was going to open up this big aquarium, which was awesome. I mean, he's the kind of guy that will make money, but he'll take that money and invest it right back into the business. And I just love him. I met him a couple of years ago. We became friends. His wife works out. My wife talks to his wife. And out of nowhere, I mean, his health was fine. There was nothing wrong. The guy never, goes to, he's never even been in a hospital. And out of nowhere, he's getting pain. And he went in and got checked out. And they told, nah, you're fine. And it was getting worse and worse. Finally went to the emergency room. They did a CT scan. To make a long story short, he's got pancreatic cancer, a pretty good sized, tumor in the head of his pancreas. And, that's a pretty serious situation. Now I've been trying to help him with nutrition and supplementation and, giving him alternative therapies. And he's still going through the whole process of getting, biopsied and finding out exactly what to do. But when I found out, and he's not a super close friend, it's not it wouldn't be you and I, because we talk all the time, right? I mean, I talk to him once a month, maybe, if we run into each other, at a reptile show, something like that. But, I consider him a friend. Mm-hmm. When I found out, I was so upset, but to the point where I was crying inside, and even outside, and it was bothering me so much. And I couldn't figure out why this was affecting me so badly like this. And then, obviously I started thinking about it. I'm yeah, well, of course, duh. Yeah, that's how your mother died, you idiot. And, and I had another friend, my Dr. Blau, believe it or not, a lot of people know him as the gynecomastia guy I send everyone to up in White Plains. He had pancreatic cancer, believe it or not. He had that Whipple procedure. They removed it. He got a little bit of chemo, and he beat it. I was having a nervous breakdown when he was diagnosed, because he's like a second father to me, this guy. And luckily he beat that about 10, 15 years ago. And so he's fine now. But, when I found out, it's like a trigger. It's like someone pushing a button inside of you, and all of a sudden it turns on this horrible feeling of doom inside of you. And all of a sudden I could care less about the fact that I'm going to have a surgery in 2 weeks. It didn't even matter anymore. I was just so overwhelmed by this. And I have to imagine that Colin feels the exact same way, especially because it's his brother, for God's sakes. how do you deal with that, Les? What do you do? I mean, how do you get past that terrible, terrible feeling when someone pushes that button inside of you that turns on something that's an old injury, so to speak, emotional injury at least?
Well, it's not even just someone pushing a button. It's like someone taking a scab and ripping it off, and you're bleeding again, right? It's that opening up that wound.
Yep.
And I'm not just saying physical, I mean mentally and emotionally. So for, Calum to say, hey, it's first of all, normalize the feelings. Because, sometimes we're like, we feel like, how could this be happening? It's almost like going through a denial.
Yeah.
And we do this almost pleading stage. So even people who don't believe in God all of a sudden pray and when they pray for a miracle or, that this isn't happening, this is a bad dream. But when the reality sits in, there's a gamut of emotions and be able to process them properly. Part of it is being able to vent, though. You have to be able to let your feelings out. And for some people, they don't let their feelings out right away. And there's no right way or wrong way to grieve, by the way, guys. But it's about being able to sometimes spend some dedicated time every day and letting out what you need to. And, for as an example, for Calum, if he is, I'm sure he's got lots of pictures of his brother, put a picture of Edward up and talk to him.
Right.
Talk to him. And that might be yelling at him because he's going to go through a gamut of emotions. I mean, obviously there's a lot of grief. He's going to miss it. He misses his brother. It's like a hole in your heart, but it's also anger to say, how could you do this?
Right.
And there could be mixed emotions of even guilt, where it's I shouldn't have gone to the Arnold's as an example, because, if I was there, then my brother wouldn't have committed suicide.
Right.
Well, let me give you a tip on people who've gone through suicide and people who've been suicidal. When they really put their minds to it, you're not going to change their mind. Right. They will find a time when you're not around. So even if Calum did stay back from the Arnold's, which is not something I would have said anyway, Edward would have found another way. He did not want to be stopped because in his mind, life was so, for whatever reason, I don't know Edward, but I've dealt with a lot of people who are suicidal. When they get to that mindset, they feel they're doing everyone else a favor by not burdening them. And that's the last thing. That's the last thing that, that we want our loved ones to feel. But we can't force our loved ones to feel a certain way, or people that we care about. So for Calum, it's, if he has those feelings of guilt, to be able to work through it, with his, like I said, with friends, with family, loved ones, professionals as needed, to be able to help him process the feelings is really important. Because once that scab has been ripped off, if you don't know how to properly put the polysporin on it and get it to properly heal, it's going to be like a constant bleeding. And that can lead to more temptation to going back to the drinking, the drugs, all those kind of unhealthy behaviors. If anything, apart from doing talking, is to being able to take care of yourself. Now, that's not a selfish thing. There's being selfish and self-care. This is self-care. What I mean by taking care of himself, both physically and mentally. Physically is, one, it helps distract you, because you can be very all consumed with these thoughts about this person. Well, in this case, for Calum, for his brother, for you, for this guy, he looks like Steve Irwin to me, but it's, it's being able to, like, while he's around, celebrate his life, and you try to give him some, as far as what you can do, let's say for this guy, you can ask him. Some people, it might say, well, try to stay positive. Well, sometimes that person doesn't want to be positive. Yeah. Let them have their feelings. So when someone has been diagnosed, because I worked on a palliative care floor, when someone's been diagnosed and they know that there's no hope. Now, I don't know if it's little hope or what's the situation with this guy of yours.
Yeah, there's still hope because they just diagnosed it. So hopefully, I don't know what the odds are of him beating it, but yeah, he'll still being assessed as to like what exactly is where it is, what is it operable,
Gotcha.
How they want to treat it. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I'm at least getting him on the right protocols in terms of ketogenic diet, which we know is good for cancer. Getting him on the right nutritional supplements, alkalinize his body, reduce inflammation in his body. I'm trying to help the alternative, the lifestyle changes that we can implement in the meantime until they decide therapeutically what they want to do with him. And, I feel very, very, I want to be a part of this with him to help him get through it, because I know that I would want, and when things happen to me, I get a million people who are experts contacting me all the time about, hey, did you try this? Did you try that? What about this? Contact this person. And I love that being a public persona, and that having people who care about me, they do that. And I think he really, when I reached out to him, I didn't know if he was going to respond, and he called me right away. So he obviously does want help. And I think that anything that I could offer him to make the situation better, because let's face it, if you do all the right modalities and you focus on, and I always tell people, treat it like, if you're a bodybuilder, treat it like it's a contest prep. Don't leave any variable unturned, because if you do, you're leaving the door open for someone else to pass you. In the case of disease, if you leave the door open, the disease can sneak in that door. So I want to close all the doors on what's going on so that we have the body at maximum efficiency and get it into a healing state, enhance the immune system. And then whatever the surgeons need to do, let them do their job. And then this way you'll recover that much quicker from the surgery. So that's where I'm at, and I'm sure Colin probably in retrospect wishes that he could have, been there to help his brother, but he was trying to help himself at this point. And I think that was the most important thing. Sometimes when you're in a bad situation, you got to worry about yourself first,
And he's going to feel, he could potentially, people in Colin's position can feel very conflicted, because they can go, again, hindsight's 20/20. And to your point, he needed to focus on him. Yes. But he may have feelings of guilt. I'm not saying he does. I'm saying he could, or people in his position have felt feelings of guilt, to saying, despite what I've gone through, I should have been there. And they almost feel guilty that they're the ones that are alive and the other person has chosen to take their life. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of responsibility, yes, but remember, everyone's responsible for their own life. And it's learning how to control what I call the controllables. And you're not in control. You can't control. You can influence. You can make suggestions. You can, in your case, let's say, do the due diligence or help someone do their due diligence in making decisions, future decisions. But you can't be the ultimate decision maker of that person.
Of course.
So it's being realistic about expectations. And again, when you're in those feelings, our logic goes out the window, where we just become an emotional ball of conflicted feelings.
It's also important to, again, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's like a ball of yarn. You got to unravel it, and it takes time, but it needs to be unraveled in a controlled way, not through alcohol or drugs. What were you going to say?
No, what I was going to say is, and I think it's important also to let everyone else out there who might be in a similar situation, no matter how bad you feel, you will not improve that other person's situation. So you being depressed and not doing anything and stopping your life because someone else is sick or someone else is going through something will not make their situation better one bit. So there's no reason for you to be miserable, torture yourself, do things that are destructive to yourself, because it's not going to fix their problem. Okay. And you have to understand that. That's very important, because sometimes I deal with people, I'm doing a contest diet for them, or I'm doing, something for them, and they lose, they're like, oh, so-and-so got sick, or, this happened to this person. I'm so depressed. I just can't go to the gym. I'm like, well, you not going to the gym and you not eating right are not going to fix that other person's situation.
Right.
So why would you want to, number one, not fix their situation and make your situation worse? So, and I say sometimes it's better that you stay focused on what you're doing, because it won't be quite as bad, because at least you're busy, and you're being productive yourself. And I think that's an important point I'd like you to speak to, because people do destructive things, somehow warped thinking that it's going to help the other person in some way. Like, all right, well, they're suffering, so I should suffer too.
Right. It's kind of they're feeling bad, so in order for me to identify them or share that misery, I can, it's not the healthy thinking. I understand why people think that way.
What is it called? Does that have a name, that kind of actions, those actions?
There probably is a name. I can't think of it at the top of me. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's almost feeling like this is my way of showing empathy for the person, because I can truly relate, because I'm putting myself not in the same situation, but in a very dismal situation.
It's like you're mirroring their behavior almost.
Right. So, I mean, is it healthy? No. But, what you were saying before, being physically active is really, really important, because not only is it good to get back into regular routines, so it doesn't get you into that dwelling into those really pits of despair of thinking, and which leads to those negative temptations. But it helps manage your stress a little bit, because when you're coping with a lot of emotions, especially when they're all over the place, you need something steady to kind of keep you on track. So again, it's controlling the controllables. You can control what you eat, as an example, for the nutrition plan. You control getting some type of exercise. Even if you don't train as heavy, still get there. Go through the motions. It's also good for your body, your hormones. Again, that distraction is really, really key, and healthy distractions, obviously. So
yeah, I every little obstacle I've overcome over the last couple of years, from these little pain in the ass surgeries I've had and all the little health issues that I've dealt with. It's funny because of all the health issues I have had no symptoms, no outward physical manifestation symptoms. So I've never had anything wrong with me. I've just found out through a scan or something like that, or maybe my ankle was a little sore or whatever. But, it was never like something debilitating where I was like, emergency room type of situation. So even though some of them, the aorta surgery I'm going to be having is major, but I'm not in pain and I'm not like suffering from the fact that I have an enlarged aorta, which is good. I don't want it to get to that stage. I don't want it to rupture. It's like, oh, he's got to go to surgery. He doesn't have a choice, So, some people want it, they almost need like a motivation to go, fix things or do things, to themselves. But, the thing is, if I would have just give up and say, you know what, I got to do this heart surgery. Why do I even go to the gym? I'm trying to be a role model for people. So it's important that I can show people, and I think that people could hopefully mirror my actions when the chips are down and when stuff doesn't appear to be going right, because there's always some good that comes of things that, Wayne Dyer always said that before every great spiritual leap, it's preceded by a fall. So there's some type of, you got to drop down a little bit to go up again. It's like the high jumper. When the high jumper runs, he ducks down first and then jumps up over the bar. So you got to have a little bit of a fall, come backwards a little bit to go back up and go beyond what you were. So if I look at it from that perspective, you know what? Yeah, I need the surgery, but I'm going to be better after the surgery, and I'm going to be able to go beyond, and I'm going to have better insight into myself, to life, and I'm going to be able to give people more relatable experiences that I've gone through. That's how I look at it. And I want to project that to you guys, even if I have fear inside me, because it's important that we all know how to deal with obstacles that come up in our life. Because let me promise you something. Even for you guys that are 18 years old out there watching this, you're going to go through some shit in life. It's unavoidable, whether you're going to go through deaths of loved ones, you're going to be sick, you're going to get injured. We don't want to think about that. We don't want to attract that into our life. That's not something you should walk around being afraid of, but more than likely something's going to happen at some point. And how you deal with that will define who you are and your character. If you fall apart and resort to drugs and just give up on life because, you stubbed your toe, you're not going to be very successful in life. If you want to be a success, you're going to have to learn to deal with adversity and figure out ways to get past it and go beyond. In other words, use that low to go higher in your life. And that's something that I've always, battled with initially, but realized that at the end of the day, every setback has always been given me an advantage at some point to go beyond where I was before. Not just from a bodybuilding muscle standpoint, but from a spiritual standpoint, from a I guess career standpoint and stuff like that. And if you look at life like that, in that positive manner, it's going to be much more productive, and you're not going to need drugs, and you're not going to need to do destructive things to try to deal with the fact that you're trying to distract yourself from what's going on. So that's the best advice I can give you guys.
That sounds good, Dave. You going after my job?
Well, your job is to help people deal with it when they're in the midst of turmoil. I'm telling people that this is what life is. And it's not just you're playing a video game and having fun the whole time. Although we you want to have fun in the journey, but there's going to be some challenges that you're going to have to encounter along the way. And it's how you deal with those challenges that really, really define you, I think. I mean,
it helps you grow too.
Yeah. I mean, look, I always say, from a bodybuilding perspective, because life is not all bodybuilding, but it's where bodybuilders, look at Dorian Yates. When he won his 6th Olympia, He had every right to say, you know what, I quit. You know, I can't do it this year. He tore part of his quad. He tore his tricep off the attachment. He couldn't train his upper body, couldn't train his lower body. He lost something like 3 or 4 pints of blood. He was bleeding internally. I think he had an ulcer. He had to get transfusion. This all was within like 4 to 6 weeks before the show. Anyone else would have quit. No, I see guys that get a sniffle and they're like, oh, I missed a week in the gym. I have to back out of my Olympia prep. Dorian was Mr. Olympia. And he showed up at that show. And whether you think he deserved to win or not, some people, I think Nasser should have deserved that win, but whatever. Dorian won that show because that's what champions do. They find a way to get to the event and win. And that mentally tough mindset he had, all those negative drawbacks, he did not let them suck the life out of him, and he did not quit. And that's the same thing. If you apply that strategy to life, same thing. You know, I can't quit just because I got to get open heart surgery. You know, you can't quit just because you tear your pec, in the gym, or you tear your quad. You come back from it better than before, or you recreate yourself after that happens and use that. I remember when I interviewed Jean-Pierre Fuchs. Remember when he tore both his quads right before the Olympia, squatting in a photo shoot with Chris Lund? He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. As he was laying on the floor there with the 2 torn quads, he couldn't even get up. He said, I know I'm not going to bodybuild anymore, which he wanted. He did still compete a few times after that. But he said, it was my out. I knew that I wanted to get out, and that was my way of getting out. And so he knew in those moments that this was an opportunity rather than a tragedy. And I think that's how you have to view life.
And that's really important, Dave. This is like, to your point, not just bodybuilding. It's things happen to us, but we don't have to necessarily take that victim mentality to say, okay, what can I do with this and move forward, instead of staying stuck in that moment, being able to progress forward, whether that's personally, professionally, emotionally, whatever that would look like. But yeah, use it as fuel.
We live in a victim society now. Everyone wants to be a victim, right? Everyone is a victim. Yeah. If I call you red and you call me white, I'm going to be offended by the fact that you said that. And if you call me, she, use a pronoun that I don't like, then I'm going to be offended. Everyone's a victim, and I think that victim mentality holds you down. It doesn't lift you up. And so stop being a victim, start being someone who takes control of their life and ignores the people that are saying negative stuff about you or what you perceive to be negative, because at the end of the day, no one really gives a shit about you. I hate to break it to you. You're not that important. Even the biggest stars who are criticized the most and loved the most, no one really, at the end of the day, when they go home and they go to their family and they eat dinner, do you think they remember all the criticisms they posted online? Nope. But I guarantee you a lot of people who are super sensitive, who want to make themselves a victim, remember every single negative criticism that's been posted about them. It's not real, though. It's not real. Don't give it life. You give it life by responding to it or reacting to it. And that's unfortunately, what's terrible. Social media is great, but it's also terrible because a lot of people can't handle it. And I hate to say it, but that's the reality. Some people just have very, very thin skin and everything bothers them. Other people, like Lee Priest, don't give a rat's ass about what anyone thinks about them. And that's why he does so well on social media, because you cannot make him upset. And if he does get upset, he'll go on there and give you a piece of his mind. So if you don't have the thick skin for social media, then don't post controversial things. Just post, nice stuff, and don't read the comments. That's my suggestion to you. I know everyone feels they need to be validated on social media by likes and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. These people don't care about you when they go home to, and go to sleep at night. The most heinous crimes that are online. Oh, can you believe? Did you hear what that guy said about so-and-so? Everyone's throwing hate at him. At the end of the day, a week later, no one even remembers that this guy did all that terrible stuff. I could bring up 14 different things that happened over the last year where people were like in the dumpster on social media. And if you bring it up, people won't even remember. I don't even remember. I can't even make the list in my head, but I know there's a lot of people that did some terrible things over the last couple of years on social media, but no one remembers. The memory is maybe 1 to 2 weeks most. After that, it's been erased from everyone's mind.
Well, the short-term memory thing is also, it's because there's always something else. So whether it's, the slap, the Will Smith slap, I mean, not to say we've forgotten per se, like we remember when you bring it up, but there's other stuff that happens every single day of the new thing, whatever the new incident is.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, yeah. So it's just kind of, focus on you getting better, being supportive, being a good person, just overall be a good person, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. And we want to send our prayers and condolences out to Calum Von Moger and his family during these difficult times. If Calum, if you want to talk to Lesley, feel free to reach out to her. I'm sure she'd love to talk to you. So
I would, yes.
All right. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Iron Therapy. I'm Dave Palumbo with Lesley Timbol. We will see you next week.
Take